You've been in this situation before. Someone walks into the room and immediately something shifts. The energy changes. You can't explain it. You can't name it. But somehow, without a single word, that person becoming controlling of everything. They're not louder. They're not angrier. They're not even trying. And yet, everyone adjusts to them. What do they know that you don't? The answer traces back to a book written over 2,500 years ago. Not a psychology textbook, not a self-help guide, a military manual, written for generals, studied by warriors, world leaders, chess grandmasters, and CEOs for over 20 centuries. The Art of War, by Sun Tzu. Here's what most people get wrong about this book. They hear Art of War, and they picture swords, armies, battlefield tactics, ancient history. But Sun Tzu wasn't really writing about war. He was writing about power, about influence, about the invisible mechanics underneath every human conflict, every negotiation, every rivalry, every relationship where one person walks away with more than the other. The battlefield was just his classroom, and the lessons he taught there apply everywhere. Let's start with the most dangerous idea in the entire book. Sun Tzu writes, "Every battle is won before it is ever fought." Read that again. Before the first move is made, before anyone raises a hand, before the conversation even begins, the outcome is already decided, not by strength, not by luck, by preparation. Sun Tzu believed that weak generals rushed into battle, hoping to figure it out as they went. Strong generals made victory inevitable before they ever stepped onto the field. They studied the terrain, they knew the weather, they understood the enemy's habits, fears, supply lines, and weak points. By the time they moved, there was nothing left to chance. Most of us do the opposite. We walk into the meeting unprepared. We have the hard conversation without thinking about what the other person needs to hear. We make our move when we're emotional, reactive, rushed, and then we wonder why things didn't go our way. Sun Tzu would say, "You lost before you started." But here's where it gets psychologically interesting. The second principle Sun Tzu obsesses over isn't strength. It isn't courage. It isn't even intelligence. It's self-knowledge. He writes, "Know yourself and know your enemy, and in 100 battles you will never be defeated." The first half of that sentence, know your enemy, that part, most people understand. Scope out the competition. Research before the interview. Understand who you're dealing with. Fine, that makes sense. But the first half, know yourself. That's the part almost no one takes seriously. And it's the part that gets people destroyed. Think about the last time someone really got under your skin. Maybe it was a coworker who constantly talked over you in meetings. Maybe it was a friend who had a talent for making you feel small. Maybe it was just someone online, a stranger, and you found yourself lying awake at 2 a.m., still composing the perfect response in your head. Why did it bother you that much? Sun Tzu understood something that modern psychology would later confirm. Your reactions tell your opponent exactly where to hit you. If you lose your temper easily, they can bait you into making mistakes. If you need approval, they can withhold it and watch you spiral. If you hate confrontation, they can push and push and push, knowing you'll fold before they have to. Your emotional patterns are a map, and anyone paying attention can use that map to navigate you wherever they want you to go. This is why Sun Tzu treats self-knowledge not as a virtue, but as a survival skill. Before you try to understand anyone else, you have to be ruthlessly honest about yourself, your fears, your ego, the buttons you don't even know you have, until someone presses them at the worst possible moment. Now let's talk about deception, because this is where Sun Tzu gets controversial, and where most people either misread him or dismiss him entirely. He writes, "When strong, appear weak. When weak, appear strong. When near, appear far. When ready to strike, appear unready." At first glance, this sounds like a manipulation manual, and if you read it that way, you miss the point entirely. Sun Tzu isn't teaching you to lie. He's teaching you something far more subtle. Never let anyone read you accurately, because the moment someone can predict your next move, you've handed them the game. Think about how you behave when you know someone is watching. In a job interview, when you desperately need the offer, do you let them see that desperation? In a negotiation, when you're close to your limit, do you let the other side feel that pressure? In an argument, when you're actually unsure of yourself, do you let your voice show it? Most people leak information constantly, through their tone, their body language, their timing, their silence. Sun Tzu's principle of deception isn't about being dishonest. It's about composure, about cultivating the discipline to not broadcast your internal state to everyone around you. The calmest person in the room is almost always the most powerful. Not because calm means confident, but because calm is unreadable. And unreadable means unpredictable. And unpredictable means no one can prepare for you. Here's a scenario that might feel familiar. You're in a tense conversation, maybe a salary negotiation, maybe a disagreement with someone you care about. The other person is pushing hard. They're emotional, loud, certain. Inside, you're rattled. Your heart is doing something uncomfortable. Your thoughts are scattered. The old version of you tries to match their energy, gets defensive, gets loud, says something you'll regret. The Sun Tzu version does something different. Gets quieter, takes up less space, lets them exhaust themselves. Because Sun Tzu knew what most people forget in the heat of a conflict. An emotional opponent is a vulnerable opponent. He writes, "If your enemy is of choleric temper, seek to irritate him. Not because you want to fight, but because an angry person is no longer thinking. They're reacting. They're making mistakes. They're telling you everything. And you, calm, still, watching, already know where this is going." Let's go deeper. One of the most psychologically complex ideas in the entire book is what Sun Tzu calls terrain. On the surface, he's talking about geography. Fight on high ground. Don't cross rivers unnecessarily. Choose the battlefield that favors your strengths. But underneath that, he's describing something universal. Every conflict has a terrain. Every conversation, every negotiation, every rivalry has a context that either works for you or works against you. And most people never think about it. They walk into someone else's environment. They let the other person set the agenda, the tone, the frame, and then they're surprised when things don't go their way. Sun Tzu would say, "You fought on their ground." Think about a salary negotiation where your employer opens with, "We have a tight budget this year." That's a terrain move. They've just defined the conversation as being about limits, and now you're fighting uphill. The counter move, the Sun Tzu move, is to reshape the ground before the conversation begins. I'd like to talk about the value I've created this year and what that's worth going forward. Same room, same people, completely different battlefield. Whoever controls the frame controls the conversation. There's one principle in this book that I think is the most misunderstood, and possibly the most important. Sun Tzu writes, "The supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting, not win by fighting better, without fighting at all." This sounds like passivity. It's actually the opposite. It takes far more skill, far more preparation, far more intelligence to engineer a situation where your opponent has already lost before they realize a conflict was even happening. Sun Tzu had a name for generals who relied on brute force. Low. The lowest form of warfare, he said, is attacking cities directly, burning them down, destroying what you could have used. The highest form is attacking strategy itself, making the enemy's plan collapse from the inside, cutting off their alliances before the battle begins, shaping circumstances so that by the time they arrive ready to fight, there's nothing left to fight. In business, this looks like moving so quickly into a market that by the time competitors react, you've already won the customer's loyalty. In personal conflict, it looks like having the hard conversation early, before resentment calcifies into something much harder to undo. In negotiations, it looks like understanding what the other person actually wants, not just what they're asking for, and finding a solution that gives them that, while giving you everything you needed. Nobody loses, nobody fights, and you walk away having gotten exactly what you came for. That's not weakness, that's mastery. But Sun Tzu also understood something darker about human nature. Victory doesn't just go to the prepared, it goes to the people who are honest about what they're up against. He writes, "If you know neither yourself nor your enemy, you will succumb in every battle." Not sometimes, every battle. This is the part most people skip, because it's uncomfortable. It requires admitting that you might be wrong about your own strengths, that the strategy you've been relying on isn't working, that the person or situation you've been underestimating is actually more formidable than you thought. Self-deception is the real enemy in Sun Tzu's world, not the opponent across the table, not the circumstances you didn't control, your own refusal to see things clearly. The general who marches into battle believing his army is stronger than it is, that general is already defeated, because reality doesn't care about your confidence. Sun Tzu's entire philosophy is built on one foundation: see things as they are, not as you wish they were. That's not cynicism, that's clarity. And clarity is what separates the people who navigate conflict gracefully from the ones who keep getting surprised by the same lessons over and over again. So what does all of this actually mean for a person living in the modern world, where the battles aren't fought with armies but with conversations, decisions, and human dynamics? It means this: most of the conflicts you're facing right now aren't going to be resolved by being louder, by being more aggressive, or by working harder while hoping things change. They're going to be resolved by going still, by watching more than you speak, by understanding more than you react, by controlling your own psychology before you try to influence anyone else's. Sun Tzu wrote for generals. But the general he was really describing was you, navigating an ordinary life full of ordinary conflicts that carry very real consequences. The job you want, the relationship you're trying to protect, the version of yourself you're trying to become. Those battles are real, and they are absolutely winnable, but only if you're willing to do what Sun Tzu demanded of every great general. Prepare before you move, know yourself before you judge anyone else, and fight only when victory is already certain. Over 2,000 years ago, a military strategist wrote 13 chapters that were supposed to be about war, but what he actually wrote was a map of the human mind, how it gets manipulated, how it manipulates others, and how, if you're paying close enough attention, you can move through the world without leaving a single unnecessary mark. That's the art he was really teaching. Not the art of war, the art of winning, quietly, intelligently, and completely.